Hello, welcome back to another episode of Somewhere Between a Film and TV podcast. We're your hosts. I am Daniel Barra.
And I'm Erwin.
And number one, thank you so much for listening and watching. Number two, what are they going to do?
They're going to like, comment, and subscribe.
Please do. Erwin, what are we reviewing?
A Complete Unknown.
A Complete Unknown, the James Mangold music biopic, which we have a whole lot of thoughts about music biopics. But before we get into all of that, Erwin, I gotta ask you a question. And also remember, everything has full spoilers. What's the spoil with a movie like this? I don't know. It's based off of someone's real life. Yeah. But what's this about?
Bob Dylan. I can't say much about Bob Dylan. I don't know much about Bob Dylan. But it's just, I guess, his rise to fame and basically seeing like behind the scenes of how he felt and like what he was and how he was as a person going through that fame.
It's interesting that you say you don't know a lot about Bob Dylan. I only knew a little bit more maybe, and I would also say, even having seen this movie, I still don't know a whole lot about Bob Dylan, which is one of the most interesting things about it, actually.
But I think that's also a point that they made in the movie as well.
So in order for us to get into all of that, because I have so many questions to ask you.
Yes.
First one, did you love it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere between?
I loved it.
Yeah?
I genuinely loved this movie.
I loved it a lot too. And we even talked shit about this movie before it came out.
Yeah,
not in the
that's
sense that,
every biopic.
Yeah. Not in the sense that we thought it was going to be bad. But literally the trailer sold it. It's like there's even a moment where it's like, how dare you play that loud music? Turn that off.
Turn that off.
And so I thought this was going to be such a standard, basic thing. And honestly, I got a lot out of it. I thought this wasn't your standard music biopic. No. What did you think?
I thought the same thing too, because before this movie was going to come out, I guess we could talk about our feelings about biopics,
which we are kind of harsh on. Unless they're good, then we're easy on them.
But I think a lot of it comes down to biopics. They tend to, I don't know, it feels like you would have to know about the person before you have to go into a biopic, which I kind of don't like that feeling,
because they're typically made for, when people say they're made by fans for the fans. That also applies to music artists as well. So I knew a lot about Queen. I don't love that Bohemian Rhapsody movie, but
it kind of sucks that I felt disappointed by it. I think just because I loved their music so good, much that it was just a letdown at that point. But with this movie, I didn't know anything about Bob Dylan. I just knew that he was famous for something. I don't know what type of music he played or anything until this movie. I was like, oh, he played folk music? I was like, oh, I like folk music. And so learning about his journey through folk music, and then especially how he changed from folk music to expanding more so to other genres as well, I was like, wow, I actually like that a lot.
I thought the reason why this worked so well for me is it wasn't just about Bob Dylan, the musician. It was also about the change of art in terms of how people express themselves, what people expect out of you, and you trying to fit that mold and not wanting to fit that mold.
That was a lot. But a lot of other artists do the same thing too. But I think in this one, they did a great job of just showcasing Bob Dylan himself as someone who wasn't going to change his mind and wasn't going to fit into that mold, like you said. And especially with like others around him too, believing in him. Even though they usually hate this guy. But they believe that he was doing the right thing, just following what he wanted to do.
No, right off the bat, I think, because I told you I was reading about the making of this and how Bob Dylan is as a person, because he's still around. And I think it's interesting that they're adapting biopics about people that are still, here.
My favorite one is Rocket Man.
I
love that one.
Don't know what my favorite one is, actually.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah. I know I love this one a lot. Way more than I anticipated, to be entirely honest with you.
Me too.
And in terms of biopics, music biopics especially, I do not like a bad one. I do not like an okay one, even. Because they're so, like, I know it. I know the motions. And
why wasn't Bob Dylan doing drugs? I didn't see that.
And one of my favorite things ever is Walk Hard, a Dewey Cox story, with the John C. Reilly one. That's actually making fun of the Walk the Line James Mangold movie from like forever ago with Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, who played Johnny Cash.
Yeah, which is everything is like full circle here.
Yeah.
And that whole point of that movie was watch that. You will never be able to watch a 3-act biopic the same because you'll only think of how much they make fun of stuff like that. Because even Bohemian Rhapsody at the beginning, he walks up on a stage and then they're like, hang on, he has to think about his entire life before he starts playing. And then it's just like the entire movie. And that's so brilliant. So, of course, you know, James Mangold.
Whoa, and Popstar Never Stopping.
Which is also amazing, which they're showing again.
Yes.
But so that was freshly on my mind, too.
Yeah, I need to watch. I can't wait to watch that movie again.
Yeah. So all of that stuff, you just keep thinking like, I know the beats. I know that if they play it wrong, it's going to come off a little bit artificial in terms of how people make music. And as someone who loves the artistic process of like how people come up with stuff, I liked that Bob Dylan, who they do not portray as a very nice person in this movie.
Not at all.
One of the absolute like dilution of his character in terms of a scene that you can present to someone and be like, Bob Dylan is this type of person. Is that scene with Monica Barbero, who plays Joan, I think it's pronounced Baez? The scene in which he shows up for no reason at her apartment and then starts playing a song and coming up with a song in the middle of the night, and then it's just kind of an asshole about it, and she kicks him out and then he leaves, and that's like
the one thing though too was the fact that he would, what is it called where you're jumping from place to place? What are those type of people?
Shoot, I know what you mean though.
Okay, right?
Yeah.
And it never showed. We never saw his place, did we? He never had his own place, it seemed.
The one that he hangs out at, that's Elle Fanning's, I basically thought was his for a while, but that's only hers. Because
And so I was just thinking, I was like, so he just, even though he has all this money, he doesn't have his own place.
There's even a scene in this. We'll get into how some people's negatives that they thought that Bob Dylan, you don't know anything about him at the end of this. I like that a lot.
Yeah, but it shows a lot about who he is. Like, he doesn't care about his past. That doesn't matter. And it's like, what matters is what he was doing with music. Yeah. And that's all he wanted to be known for. And
the other thing I love about this is that he has no definition of himself. He's constantly trying to go against the grain at any given moment. Even once people start appreciating him for who he is, and maybe this is just the type of person that he was, or still is, he doesn't like being defined as anything, that he will pivot and no longer be defined as that thing. Yes. Which I found really fascinating from a character study perspective, because it kind of makes you want to know, like, why was he like this? Why is he like this? Or there'll be random lines in this where they're like, oh yeah, when he was in the circus, and he's just like, he was? And random characters will know less about him even if he knew them longer than the other person. Yes. Which I found really fascinating. And let's say that in terms of this, what we talked about, like the scene where he gets a check and he just kind of like smiles at it, and then he's like whatever about it, basically. That, you know, he was never in it for money. He kind of just shows up and that's it. Like, he's just sort of in people's lives. Yeah. Especially, did you kind of pinpoint when you started to realize, like, oh, this isn't the kind of movie I was thinking it was going to be?
I was thinking that was whenever he was sleeping with Ella Fanning.
Oh, yeah.
And like her, like, going through the civil rights movement. Yeah. I think that's when, because at first I was like, oh, they're going to showcase more of like his political side too. Yeah. But they just casually bring it up. But I think because in this movie, they definitely focused more on just like what he was about, and they just kept reminding you over and over again. Like, sure, like all this other stuff was happening, and like he was doing this too. Yeah. But all he cared about was music. Yeah. And that's what he was about. And so, and I think a lot of biopics, they tend to stay. It's just weird because, like, especially with musical biopics, they tend to stay away from what the music was, and they try to focus more on like, oh, this this person cared more about this more so than their music. But for us, the audience, we only know them based off their music.
No, and not them. The reason why, like, let's say I'm gonna keep citing Bohemian Rhapsody, which is an example of all the stuff I can't stand about biopics. Basically, this subverts a lot of those things. A different movie with a different writer and different director would have had a whole thing about his political beliefs and a montage set to the charts are rising and escalating. And
dude, I forgot about that.
And then like, you know what I could say? I bet anything in a different director's hands, the times they are changing would have been playing while it would have been like a graphic of the charts going up. And then you'd be like, oh, because his life is changing. But... And I remember in a different review, I even said, I hope that song is in this. It is, and it's one of the best parts of the movie. The times they are changing, whenever people start singing along to it. And I like how they do it differently. They say that his life is changing, but it's done in a different way. Elle Fanning starts to realize that she's just kind of a background
It just seems person. Like the people in his life were changing. It doesn't seem like he was changing. Because it just seems like he's always been that way. Yeah. Throughout his whole life. It's just everyone around him, they're changing his like belief and like sense of who he is. Yeah. And saying like, this is not who I thought like was and everything.
This is very much a case of, and I told you I read about like the making of this movie. It's based off of a book. And one of the more interesting aspects of this is that Bob Dylan had firsthand, what do I call it? He was hands-on with this. He rewrote some of his own dialogue to sound more like him. Yeah. They said that they gave him the script, but initially when James Mangold had met him, that he was being very Bob Dylan about it. He said he just wanted to talk about his older movies and not about, he's like, so what are you doing right now? And he was like, well, the movie about you. And he was like, but what's it about? And he said, I didn't want to give a whole explanation about his own life. So I just said, it's about a young man who's lost, who finds his way. And then he realizes that people want him to be defined in a certain way, so he changes his way again and continues to be lost. And Bob Dylan was like, that sounds interesting. And so later on, he requested the script for it and was like, I like this. And then added more of it. They said that they enacted all of his own lines out to see if he actually would say something like that. Because, of course, it's a biopic. They change everything. It's not 100% accurate. But they said that it's more accurate to definitely some of the stuff that, if presented the opportunity, he absolutely would have acted like that, for sure. Oh, okay. And it's one of the more, like, it's not all 100% like beat for beat stuff that happened. But it is more accurate than, let's say, some other biopics that have come out, for sure. Yeah. But what did you think of... We haven't even touched on the main performance of this movie. What did you think of Timothée Chalamet in this?
Oh, I mean, he did a great job. Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of interesting to see Timothée Chalamet from... What was the first movie? I think it was Call Me By Your Name when I first saw him.
Yeah, I think me too.
It's like been, over 10 years now? Yeah. And his growth in terms of like how he picks certain movies. Mm-hmm. And he definitely... Every time I see him, I'm like, he's a great actor now. Yeah. Like, it wasn't really convincing for me until... I forget which movie it was. Where I was like, oh, he's a great actor. I think it was Little Women.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was for me, too. Yeah. A lot of people were on board with him before that. Yeah. I took a little bit more convincing.
Especially Beautiful Boy. Yeah. That movie is so good.
And then it turns out he's in Interstellar. Everybody has that moment where they realize he is in Interstellar. Barely. But yeah. He even says that that's his favorite movie he's ever done. You're like, you're barely in it,
man. That's awesome.
Yeah. But... I really like that I've seen...
He does a great job in, like, mannerisms with Bob Dylan. Yeah. Because then I saw some videos of, like, Bob Dylan himself, and I'm like, he did a great job.
No, because I was kind of concerned, like every biopic, that this would be so... an imitation. Just, like, let's do an impersonation of Bob Dylan, who's apparently, like, very easy to satirize in terms of how he acts. Like I said, the Walk Hard song where they make fun of Bob Dylan is so funny. Yeah. But... Or Weird Al Yankovic has also done stuff, and he's such a like an enigma of a person that it's kind of not easy to define who he is. That it's probably easier to make fun of him more than anything else. So actually trying to tap into that type of person, I think,
especially when it sounds like he has little to go off of too. Yeah, and like. You can only go off a base of like meeting Bob Dylan, and if that's how he is already,
you'd probably be like, well, shoot, how on earth do I try and like, especially actors like Timothée Chalamet is not a method actor, but like let's say that you're like, well, how am I even supposed to figure this guy out if I don't even know how he thinks? And you're probably like, I don't know if Bob Dylan knows how he thinks half the time. But
I also like the fact that how he was marketing the movie.
Oh yeah,
as well, that was pretty cool. I like the fact that he would actually go to different areas or schools. Yeah. And because how do you convince people like, hey, you should watch this movie about Bob Dylan? And if most people are like, well, I listen to Travis Scott, so why should I go watch Bob Dylan?
I will say though, listening to the music here, I had the same thing of, because we'll also talk about the music in a second. I had the same thing of, I know more Bob Dylan songs than I thought.
Me too. I didn't realize that as well.
And I realized something. He 100% is definitely an inspiration for Wallows, which is like one of my favorite bands ever. Because listening to some of the contents of the lyrics here, I was like, there's no way, right? You look it up, sure enough. And
that's great.
Especially the harmonica stuff, too.
Yeah.
But the music here, what'd you think of it?
The music was good.
Yeah?
It's something I would definitely listen to outside of this movie.
I've been listening to the soundtrack because something I like that they did here is that Timothee Chalamet is doing all of his own singing. All of it. Same for everyone, actually. Edward Norton, Monica Barbaro, everyone is doing.
That's great. I didn't know that.
Because if you look at the Spotify list, it's all them.
Oh.
And I thought that's awesome. That's such a. It's really hard to define that voice too. Think about it this way: he not only has to try and get the mannerisms and the voice of Bob Dylan, but his singing too.
Yeah, that's impressive.
And going back and forth, they sound very similar. And I don't know why I was worried about Timothée Chalamet singing. We've seen Wonka.
Wonka's amazing.
And it's amazing. Yeah.
I need a sequel.
I hope that they do one. But Edward Norton is one of those actors I've always been one of my favorites. Did you like him in this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Once I figured out that was him.
Yeah. Pete Seeger I thought was really interesting in terms of how this movie they described as, if we can't quite define who Bob Dylan is as a person, let us try and have the other characters react to him. And it's more about how people come across him, how he changes their lives instead of how they change his.
Yeah.
And what I like about this movie a lot of music biopics run into, he's an asshole. He's not the best person all the time. And I like that Bob Dylan apparently just as a person is like, whatever, you feel how you feel with like anything I do.
Yeah.
And so many of them try and, we have to sugarcoat how we acted at the time because of whatever. But here it's not that at all. And they said that they compared this movie to Amadeus.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
In terms of they wanted to depict someone as a genius and how some people react to their genius, and whether they react to it positively or if they become jealous of that as well.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of moments, there's a lot of music in this, but there's a lot of moments where even Joan in this reacts to him in this way where you're like, you can sense this kind of friction there.
Well,
in terms of both of them.
Yeah, especially whenever he first started and then she was a lot bigger during that time. And the fact that he rose to basically to her level and then above her level is insane too. I can see the jealousy of that.
No, and they even bring up, the reason why I brought that up at all is because of Pete Seeger's involvement where they were talking about, and I want to ask you this question just in terms of like general art, but I love this scene. It's one of my favorite scenes in the movie whenever they're like, whenever Bob Dylan's like, did you even listen to the music that I gave you?
Yes.
And he's like, I mean, I know the direction you're headed. And then he's like, so you didn't. And I thought that was brilliant. I thought that
I make a reference to a movie and it says somebody's like, you should watch this movie, and I make a reference to it and they haven't seen it.
And you're like, but I
understand what movie you're recommending.
Yeah.
But I just haven't gotten to it.
No, I lent you the Blu-ray. Like, have you listened or have you watched it yet? But us, whenever they tell us they only watch our shorts
and not the videos.
The whole video.
So you guys hated the movie. It's like you haven't seen the short or like the whole video. Thing. Yeah. Okay.
Man, that Grinch review of ours. But my question for you is, just in terms of what this movie is doing, like what it's about art changing, did you feel like the point it was making stands the test of time? Because I think that the whole point of this movie is that art can evolve and change as you grow as a person. Do you like that? Do you agree with that?
I mean, I don't think it's something I could agree nor disagree, to be honest. But art is always changing, evolving too, and especially when it comes in so many different forms. And I think I learned that during my like art appreciation class.
Oh yeah.
Just because learning just when it comes to like paintings and like different acrylics and just how everything is like changing from like the Renaissance to basically how paintings are now.
Yeah.
And now it's to the point where where paintings are created at that very moment and it's so special and unique that it can't ever be replicated.
Yeah.
But that's why it's so important to realize and having an open mind to different other art forms.
Yeah.
And knowing that just you shouldn't just be solidified to one area as well. I mean, it's also just like you as a person knowing that, you know, if you're good at, you know, drawing, but you also want to practice at like singing.
Yeah.
Well, like you shouldn't just be an art, like a person who just draws. You can also be a person that sings as well.
I thought this was inspirational in the sense of like, if you are passionate about something, if you don't want to be defined by any sort of rules or whatever it may be, that this movie is making a huge statement about that and going against what's expected of you sometimes. Because sometimes people have these expectations for you and you don't really want to conform to them or be like defined by them. And that's what I liked so much about this.
Yeah, don't be stuck in your mold.
Yeah.
It's someone else's mold. That's what I meant.
Okay. No, somebody else like that's trying to... There's also one great moment in an elevator with Bob Dylan when he's like looking at this guy that kind of... I think you're trying to... It's implying that he's thinking that's like a version of him where he follows him to some random club at night and then he gets punched in the face by some guy that's like...
that was so random.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, I didn't expect that.
But...
Hey, but she took his glasses. I don't know why she did that.
Because one of those, you know how we were making fun of like tropes in biopics where it's like, we're going to start chasing you around. Oh, yeah. Bob Dylan was like known for being a ladies' man, essentially. Yeah. It's him, the Beatles. I love that they mentioned the Beatles in this, by the way. Yeah. But they're like, so we don't have to compete against the Beatles. And then I just thought that was funny. But that and just sort of, I like Johnny Cash's involvement in this a lot. He was sort of like the rebellion character.
Yeah. It seemed like he wanted to do what Bob Dylan wanted to do, but just never took the leap or chance.
I haven't seen Walk the Line in a very long time, so I don't remember what James Mangold defined of him in that, but he was very much the kind of like... He was always to the side in this movie, but everybody idolized him. I love the moment. It's just a great movie moment whenever he pretends the guitar is a gun, basically, and then starts playing the song. That was amazing.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. Also, I told you, I did not know that was Boyd Holbrook. I thought that was some other person. It was
the black hair and then the straight white teeth.
Yeah, I was incredibly surprised by that.
Yeah.
I love the moment, because I think that this movie is also very funny. Whenever he's trying to park out of the... he keeps crashing into other cars.
It's like, here, try this.
Yeah. I thought that was great. But, I thought that this movie had way more to say than I really anticipated, and I thought it was really incredible. Yeah. What'd you think?
I thought it was great, especially since James Mangold. I mean, I haven't seen Indiana Jones and Now Destiny.
It was okay.
But I've seen what was it? I've seen Wolverine, Logan,
Ford v Ferrari.
Ford v Ferrari was amazing.
Yeah. Also, he's made one of the best westerns ever, 3:10 to Yuma.
Oh, I haven't seen that one. I heard about that.
Yeah.
But I am excited. Is he making a Star Wars movie?
He was, but who knows what's...
I don't even know.
Yeah, doesn't matter. Does not matter.
Guys.
But yeah, I love this. Actually, I would watch this again happily. I
would too.
Yeah. If physical media was still around, I'd buy this.
Dude, please don't say that.
Yeah.
I need it.
Overall, what's your score?
5 out of 5.
Yeah, I also give this a perfect score, 5 out of 5, and maybe it's an expectation thing with us. But...
I think so too, because the way I would also watch it again, just because I love the way they portrayed this character. I guess it's not character, but like this, person in real life and in this movie. So
I'm telling you, I was stalling going to see it, and I was like, another one of these, and then. Even though it had great reviews, but even then, I was still just like, I don't know if I want to watch a 2-hour and 20-minute music biopic.
It did not feel 2.5 hours.
No, I was
whatsoever.
Honestly, when around that time when they start realizing you're wrapping up, I'm like, oh man,
it kind of sucked, right? Yeah. Like I feel like there was so much to say about him, but I don't know. I was shocked. I didn't know he won a Nobel Prize.
Yeah, no, the end of this when he says he did not show up. By the way, the premiere for this, he didn't show up there either.
That's awesome.
He's such a brilliant songwriter too. I think that's why other people get frustrated because he'd be irritating everybody in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And I love that one of the moments that there's so many different things where they contrast something that happened earlier in the movie that you realize people are just getting fed up with him. Is when he's staying with Joan, which, by the way, they kind of just totally skip over the fact that he cheated on his girlfriend.
Yeah.
They only ever imply that she found out.
Yeah.
But especially whenever she, like, sees them singing and she's like, and then that's what makes her walk out. There's so many. Do you have a favorite scene in this?
It's probably with Joan and Bob Dylan. And it's when Bob Dylan arrives to her place unannounced.
Yeah.
I think it was like during like the third act. Or like the second, or the
it's
middle,
towards like it's towards it's heading
but
into
it's
like
that it's just when she's trying to sleep and he's just trying to do his music, and I think that's where you see the disconnect with Bob Dylan and how he his passion and what he wants to do, and like just seeing everybody else going through, because I think that really solidified like how everyone else feels around him.
I had a few different things I definitely reacted to, because I mean, let's be honest here. I kept thinking, okay, what's the Oscar clip for Timothée Chalamet? There's a few, but my personal favorite moments in the movie are in the elevator when they're like, it's sort of something like, who are you? And it's like, well, whoever they don't want me to be. Yeah. And that escalates into, I think it's the same scene, where he walks out and she's like, I love you. And he's like, well, I don't know you.
Oh, no, I don't think that's the Oscar scene. I think the Oscar scene would be Edward Norton and Timothée Chalamet about the albums. Like,
definitely.
That one's a great scene.
I was just saying that was my favorite moment in the movie.
I can see Edward Norton winning Best Supporting Actor in this one.
Absolutely see that as well. Yeah. I don't know who's up for what, but he
did a great job.
He's incredible in it. He brings a very like good-natured. He's the kind person in this movie
because he just wants what's best for folk music.
Yeah,
and especially since Bob Dylan helped with folk being such a world known type of music, and he wants to keep it just folk.
I know we just had our score, but now I'm realizing I have a little bit more to say.
I know.
Because folk music, I had a phase in like 8th grade where I was like obsessed with Mumford & Sons, and so listening to some of this music, I was like, oh, I recognize this all. I was like, I know exactly what kind of music's happening here. But the scene where they actually build up to him playing electric guitar, like all that stuff, is really well done.
He would choose it was like the electric guitar and then just
like, which one do you want? It was like that one. And
and then eventually at the end he did the electric guitar.
I love that he goes back the next day because you're kind of confused. I think they did this on purpose. You don't really know what the atmosphere is of that concert until it's over.
Yes.
Because I know that some artists now get mad. I mean, they should rightfully get mad when people throw shit at them.
Oh, I would hate that
too. Yeah. But I think at the time, it was so like... Because we talk about how, people clutch their pearls at random shit now, right? But this...
Me, when I hear jaw-dropping news, oh my God.
But, like, you know how sometimes, and I think Twitter's guilty of this, I think every social media thing's guilty of this, whenever they react to stuff that's new or unheard of, everybody's like, what? How dare you? Yeah. And then sometimes you hear stuff about news where you're like, what do you mean he busted out the electric guitar and everybody got mad at him? But, like, I get it, actually. Yeah. And so understanding how groundbreaking that was at the time, especially starting to play this like rock folk hybrid at just a pure folk festival, I thought was like really interesting just in terms of...
I love how it kept going back to that festival. Yeah. That's what was great. Because then you just see the different like, levels in his life. Yeah. And how it just kept progressing and how what he wanted to do.
No, and especially just in terms of this is kind of like the linchpin of like what folk builds to every year. Yeah. But they wanted him to expand beyond that. Yeah. But of course, Bob Dylan was trying to be so non-conformist literally the entire movie. Yeah. My other favorite scene in this is defined by Elle Fanning, and it's the scene in which they have the gate between them. Oh, yes. And she's like, I'm sure it's fun to be the guy. Yo. But it's not fun to be the plate that's spinning. And she's like, and I'm a plate. And I thought that was brilliant.
That was a great exchange of dialogue.
Yeah. If you want to talk about supporting actress, that's the scene right there, I think.
Yeah, I can see that.
But overall, I thought this movie was phenomenal. Yes. I really did. I was just completely shocked by it.
And now I kind of want to watch the movie again.
Yeah, no, I got so much out of this. I really did. Again, maybe it's an expectation thing where I was like, I don't want
to. I think it is too, but...
Yeah, but I thought there was just so much heart and everything in this. But again, 5 out of 5 from both of us. Yeah. One of my favorite movies of the year for sure. But, Erwin, what's up next?
Best and the worst?
The best and the worst movies of the year. Yes. That's going to be exciting. I'm really excited about making both of those, actually.
Oh, dude. I think the worst one is going to be funny.
Can we?
Huh?
We'll talk about it.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it.
Thank you, guys, so much for listening and watching. We will see you next time.